Hi everybody. Of all the topics I get, there's one topic that gets asked about so frequently, it skews all the other topics far from being not even on my radar. And that topic has to do with career growth. How do you climb up the corporate ladder? How do you end up having a meaningful career? So in this video, let's dive into some of the relevant details. Now, before I get to the tactical parts of all of this, I want to take a step back and describe the environment that we're all going to be playing in. I want to highlight what's probably the most important visual that describes your typical organization. It's often known as the corporate pyramid or the organizational pyramid. And every single one of us who works in a large company or a small company fits neatly inside this pyramid. And so this pyramid describes the hierarchy that exists in most organizations really well, because at the top you have the CEO. One level below you have what's often a senior leadership, the individuals entrusted by the CEO to carry off and carry out important activities in the company. And then you have everybody else. And the idea behind career growth, to grossly oversimplify it, is you start somewhere towards the base of the pyramid and you want to climb your way up towards the top to one day maybe even becoming the CEO. The way to describe career growth is that it's a competition for finite resources. As you start climbing up towards the top, you can find there's only one CEO. There's going to be a handful of senior leaders. And this process repeats itself at every level as you're trying to climb it. And the thing to always remember is that from this despair posters from many years ago is that not everyone gets to be an astronaut when they grow up. Now, that could be it's kind of depressing to hear that, but it also should be a motivating factor as well, because a big part of career growth is figuring out how you can differentiate yourself from others so you are chosen, you are appointed to help climb the ranks and have more influence and do all the things that you're now entrusted in being able to do. So the corporate pyramid I showed earlier was very generic. It just had your CEO and senior leaders and then just a large bucket for everything. Every company that you work for will have some variation of what's often known as a career ladder for each of the disciplines you care about. They'll have multiple distinctions, multiple levels, multiple titles that designate what part of the career ladder you're in, how high in the corporate pyramid that you currently fall into. And if you take your typical tech company, especially ones that are modeled after Meta, Netflix, or Google, you'll often find that they have this structure where you have levels 1 through 7, which often make up the bottom, up to the top 1/3 of the pyramid. Then you have your directors, then you have your senior leadership, often vice presidents, senior vice presidents, presidents, and then you have, of course, your CEO. And to get a better understanding, of course, of how each company treats levels and the various stages of the career, there's a great website I like to refer to. It's called levels.fyi. .fyi is the last part of the domain name, and there they provide a lot of information about how every tech company, at least the most popular tech companies, have their levels set up. So definitely go there to just see how things are going. Now, getting back to where we are here. If I had to describe career growth, I'd break it up into two buckets. One is early in your career. The second bucket is later in your career. And the reason why I make this distinction is that the skills you need to climb up the corporate pyramid vary greatly, depending on which stage of your career you're in. What applies early in your career often doesn't apply later in your career, and what applies later in your career, trying to use those skills or guide someone early in your career with that information will be very helpful as well. There's almost a distinction between the two worlds you need to navigate as part of this. And so there are three ingredients that I think are critical to having good career growth. One is be very good at something the company cares about. Two, have a supportive manager. And three, be at the right place at the right time, also known as luck. And so let's see how these ingredients apply to the various stages of the career that I kind of highlighted. So let's start with early in your career first. Early in your career growth is really about being good at the fundamentals of your job and having a supportive manager. On the fundamentals front, do you know the ins and outs of what is required for your job? Can people trust you to get the job done? And here's always a stretch goal, I highlighted this in one of my earlier videos, is do you enjoy the problem space you're working in enough to be one of the world's best practitioners in it, because never underestimate the positive dividends you'll get for doing your job better than anybody else. And so if you can pull that off, you're in a great spot, especially early in your career. That's going to jumpstart your growth very rapidly. Just being very good at what you do, and hopefully being very good at what you do better than anyone in the industry, or at least close to anyone in the industry. Now, no matter how good you are individually at your job, your first few managers are going to be critical as well. They play an outsized role in how the rest of your career will shape up, because they set the foundation for what it means to have good career growth, for what it means to identify what your gaps are, what your strengths are, and how to be guided appropriately to close those gaps, highlight your strengths, and to be effective at your level you're currently in, and hopefully learn what it takes to be effective at the next level they need to go to as well. They will be the biggest advocates for advancing to the next stage in your career, and especially early in your career, your immediate manager holds the keys to your promotion. They are often the primary individual who needs to be convinced, who needs to see that you can demonstrate you'll be effective at the next level to be able to be taken to the next level as well. And what plays less of a role in early in your career is luck. You aren't likely going to be impacted by organizational drama and politics. Your scope will be fairly narrow and well defined. So it's all about execution and making sure your manager sees that you have the right skills to execute and be effective as a team. Now, later in your career, the rules of the game change greatly. So almost everything I just said right now for what applies to early in your career, you can pretty much just ignore it, because later in your career, it's going to be very different. Because the thing that you need to figure out is that being very good at something the company cares about, the very things that may have led you to getting to where you are from early in your career to now being more senior in your career, it's no longer critical. Using the tech industry as an example, you'll find that most senior leaders, they're not writing code. They're not creating PRDs or having insightful opinions on product strategy. They're not hands-on working on designing and developing a product. They're not out there talking to individual customers and figuring out what their problems are and troubleshooting what needs to be done. What they are doing though is hopefully using their years of prior hands-on experience to put into context today's challenges and making sure the right people have the right set of guidance to be effective in doing the hands-on work that they are no longer doing themselves, and also just articulating what a good path forward can look like, even if they aren't going to be building the path themselves. Being able to know what is a good implementation of something and a bad implementation of something, that is probably very critical, more so than how exactly you do the nitty-gritty details of making that thing come to life itself. And so being very good, it's still important. You need to remember how you were good at some point, but you're not going to be judged anymore on your actual tactical outcomes. And having a supportive manager, it's still important, but actually I'd say having a supportive manager is always important. But as you get further and further higher in your career, your manager won't be the one who's going to be singularly influencing your career growth. You need to generate what I like to call a supportive village of sorts, where many individuals across your organization can vouch for your impact and readiness, which means that it's not just good enough for your manager to be like giving you the thumbs up, they're ready for the next level. Your manager's peers, your manager's manager, your skip level, and maybe other influential leaders across your organization. The more senior you go, the more senior you need to have sponsors from other parts of your company to highlight that you are the right person for this right job, knowing full well that there's very limited spots for people to continue to grow further in your career. And so that's where being at the right place at the right time, in some cases, actually plays a big role, the all-important luck factor. So if we go back to the corporate pyramid, I'm going to explain to me situations that greatly influence and impact positively your ability to get lucky. For example, are you part of a team that is quickly expanding, which means that you now need senior people to help guide this growth? The pyramid here just keeps expanding wider, which means there's a gap that's been created that you now could hopefully play a strong role in filling. Did your manager get a promotion and is now looking for someone to help take on more responsibility? And that someone is probably going to be you, because you may have demonstrated all these right skills. So that's another opportunity that was created because your manager had upward career mobility. Was there a reorganization, which happens all the time in companies? companies, and the larger the company, the more reorganizations or reorgs you'll have to go through, was something done that ended up having projects being moved around and things being reshuffled, but your card came up favorably. So in this case, the organizational change was a great benefit to you. And there are many situations that are often caused by people coming in, people leaving, products coming in, products leaving, and so on, that are all situations that greatly influence your ability to get very, very lucky. Now, here's the sobering truth about all this though. These luck multiplying situations are often hard to find, and they're often difficult to just sit around waiting for. And this is why many individuals, especially as they get more senior and have spent quite some time at one particular company, change companies as part of reaching the next level in their career. Or to put it differently, changing companies is often the best way to go from waiting to get lucky to taking proactive steps in growing your career. And you might be like, wait, that makes no sense. Why would we take people who are very experienced, have a lot of institutional knowledge, and just have them essentially leave to go somewhere else with that skill? Well, this brings me to probably the worst kept open secret in the industry, especially the technical industry, but I've heard from others in other industries that this works very similarly. It's this. Many companies have limited budgets to promote existing employees. There's always a finite amount of money they have at the end of the year, and that money needs to be divided to see who gets promoted and so on. Or they often have complicated hoops that individuals need to jump through to qualify for the next level. If you search the internet, you'll find different companies have different criteria, some of which almost is a full-time job in itself to write the justification for why you need to get promoted. And so budget is often a constraint that makes it hard for people to get promoted, and the process is often a constraint that makes it difficult for people to get promoted. Now, the thing is this. These same companies, many of these companies, will, after just a few hours of interviews, hire external candidates at higher levels without blinking an eye. So the options are, you can be in your company, you can spend many years trying to do all the right things and then, fight for finite resources to get promoted, or you can just apply, and then after a day of interviews, half a day of interviews, maybe even 1 or 2 interviews, you now are at the next level that you need to be in without having to go through all that extra rigmarole. And the thing is, everybody does it. Just look around your own team. A high percentage of everyone senior in your orbit probably switch companies and roles multiple times, with each change leading to a jump in their career. LinkedIn is great for being able to do this. Whenever you see someone that is hired in as a senior leader, look at their background. You'll often see that they have basically used the opportunity to change companies as a way of furthering their career goals. And unless you're the rare unicorn, this is how career growth in your career typically works. There are exceptions. There are often individuals who've been at a place for many, many years and have also been able to ride through the various changes to be influential and have great career growth. But on average, career growth is always going to be defined by having to often look for the best opportunity and make the change proactively as opposed to waiting to happen, especially at senior levels. So career growth is about how do you go from the bottom of the corporate pyramid to the top of the corporate pyramid. And we looked at 2 worlds where early in your career, the rules and the guidelines you need to follow are different, and then how later in your career, what you need to optimize and focus on are different. But at the end of the day, the goal really is, how do you make sure that you're learning important skills, being able to be content in what you're doing, and hopefully also having career growth at the same time. And so if you want to discuss this further, you can always comment below in whatever network you're viewing this in currently. Go to the forums at forumnetgroup.com. And of course, my newsletter is actually a great resource to be kept up to speed regularly on various topics I write about, primarily around product development, career growth, and what I like to call unconventional career wisdom. And so with that, like, comment, or subscribe on what my content to be notified more quickly about it. Turn on notifications so that you don't miss anything that I do. Follow me at Karupa on all the various social networks. Some of them are not at Karupa, some of them have a different name to it, but you'll find it by just finding me in the right location. And I also tend to write a lot of books on various technical topics, and so if you are interested in them, do check those out. Links to all of that below. And with that, I will see you all next time.